Hey now, it's Ruben with Help Find the Others. I hope everyone's hanging in there. These are crazy times and everything, but I'm grateful for everyone that's continuing to take part in our community on Discord and joining in on the live streams when Stan does that, and listening to the podcast, giving thumbs up, downloading, doing all the things you do. I'm still eternally grateful. I haven't made a video in a while. Much like I imagine a lot of people, it's hard to stay focused in times like these. It's every hour there's breaking news on something you're supposed to be angry about or have a dispute with someone else about, and it's taking a lot of mental discipline to stay focused, and I don't know how I feel about a lot of things, and I know for the most part this channel, people probably don't want to hear any political things, and they just want to just talk about drugs, man, right? and I'll definitely get back into that, but I don't know, I'm just so focused on kind of digesting and analyzing current events right now that I don't know, it's just where my brain's at. I do, and then also I haven't put out videos even talking about that stuff that much because it doesn't age well. Talking about coronavirus doesn't age well because we're finding out new things every day. So and then talking about protests and riots is such a hot button issue that I don't want to accidentally say something that people we're on such a witch hunt to label people as one side or the other, that I haven't really felt like talking about that, because I don't want people to think I'm like taking a stance and then you're either against me or for me or whatever. But I would like to point out, go back and watch my first coronavirus video that I did, where I was at the spot that the government cleared out all these trees, and I was talking about that. I would like to point out that was prior to any sort of shutdown or lockdown. And I said the government will do too much, too late, that won't really help the situation, but they will pat themselves on the back for the resolution that eventually will be a good resolution. And we're seeing that play out. I just didn't know they would be so heavy-handed as they were. I also said that they would get caught in a lie and use tricky speech in order to cover their ass, basically. And so we just saw this just the other day, because there's so much debate over wearing a mask and not wearing a mask. At first the government said don't wear a mask, there's no need, and then they switched their tune. Well, and then the Dr. Fauci or whatever just came out and said, well, we knew that you should be wearing masks, but we withheld that information because of the supplies. And it's what the government does. The government's not going to save us from any of this stuff. We're going to save us, So I said that from the start, and that has aged well, because it's exactly how I saw the situation unfolding. Working for the government, I saw how they did things, and because I'm someone who expands and analyzes situations, it's not just the Department of Agriculture that works that way. It's the entire government, and it doesn't matter the size of their budget or the power of their departments. That is the way the government works. And I just knew it would happen. Now, I also knew that we would end up with once there were shutdowns, it was going to be 2 weeks, and then it changed to 4 weeks, and then at first it was flatten the curve, and whatever, and it's just been this like continual. If the government just came out and said we don't know what the hell's going on, that'd be a lot better than like trying to always come from this area of expertise when you don't know shit. The government doesn't know shit. Nobody knows shit. And nobody wants to acknowledge that. Everyone wants to be an expert, but nobody knows shit. And so I knew that once the government shutdowns and all that stuff, once that drug on long enough, with businesses closed and people being out of work, I knew this would lead to social unrest. And obviously the spark of that fire that was set was the killing of George Floyd. But for people to act like that was, shined a light on systemic racism in the law enforcement. I've been sharing videos of not just black people, but just police brutality for years, and nobody, like on social media and stuff, nobody comments, likes, shares, nobody, to where now that's all you see, and so it's like the George Floyd murder was not unique, unfortunately, but it happened at a time to where people were already, tense. Situation was tense. We were already divided and all this stuff, and so it just sparked this powder keg. But I'm glad that people are seeing it now, because like I said, like, it's been an issue that you've heard me talk about cops. I fucking hate cops. But now, there's so much more going on with these protests than just racism. And it's just like I said, it's hard for me to stay focused on what's going on. It's hard for protesters to stay focused. There's people out there protesting 10 different things. There's people counter-protesting. There's all of these things. We're just so confused and can't focus on what the issues are, So, I fully support the protests. I don't think that destroying small businesses or businesses really of any kind really is going to do anything, other than put people out of work and ruin people's, make the financial situation worse in this country. But if I was a younger man, I'd be out there with everyone. And that's not a cop out. I'm not a sellout. It's just that I've seen time and time again. I've been at protests. I've marched in my youth. Like, don't get me wrong. I love the message of killing in the name of by Rage Against the Machine. I've loved that since it came out. I'm a fuck the system kind of guy. But the thing is that as I've gotten older, I've realized that the most successful way to change any system is to recreate it and to create a new system, right? And so these protests of millions of people in the street, they're going to succeed in getting policies changed in some cities, and probably some convoluted bill in Congress that, does as much harm as it does good, and, is more of a show than anything else. That'll happen. There will be policy change that comes from this as far as policing. But the culture change, I don't think it's going to really change culture. I don't know. I think people that are racist or don't like the Black Lives Matter movement or whatever, they're just going to dig their heels in. They're not really going to change their mind. This is basically like a Facebook, Twitter beef that flooded out into the streets, and like, I just don't know where it ends. Unfortunately, and I hate to, I hope I don't manifest this through my thoughts, but I think it will end with something really violent that brings people together, either a terrorist attack or a mass shooting or something like that, or just the cops killing a whole bunch of people. I don't know, but like I said, I don't want to manifest that, but that's my gut feeling of where this goes. So the point I wanted to say, and the way I'll label this video, is that Bitcoin, or something like Bitcoin, is going to be, and already has been, the most peaceful revolution that we'll see in our lifetime, and it's a war with the banks and fiat money and governments and stuff like that, that requires no guns to revolt. It requires no violence. It requires you can be anonymous. You don't even need to say you're partaking in the revolution. And the reason I think that, and I may be wrong that it's Bitcoin. I may be wrong of who can be part of the revolution, but I don't think I am. And but what I do know I'm right about is that we need to undercut the systemic forces that keep the wealthy wealthy, keep the poor poor, and make it hard for the middle class to move up, to grow financially. Now, the systemic problems that cause that, yes, they're racism, right? But I think the even more widespread systemic problem that we have in not just America, but in the world is classism. Okay. Now, for an example of what I mean by that being stronger is, say you're an upper middle class African American. Yes, you're still gonna encounter racism in your life on a personal level, but you're not as likely to encounter systemic racism in that, if you're already wealthy and you go to a bank and you're an African American, you're probably going to get whatever loan you're trying to get. If you are an entrepreneur who's not already wealthy and an African American, and you go to try to start a business and get a loan, you encounter racism, you're probably not going to get the loan. So there's classism on top of that. But it's personal racism as well, which I'm sure a lot of African Americans from all walks of socioeconomic life encounter personal racism. But so what I'm saying is that, and it's not even the banks. There's a podcast. He's a Twitter guy, Bitcoin Zay. And he wrote a book called Bitcoin in Black America. And I've heard him on several podcasts. Isaiah Williams, I can't remember. But at Bitcoin Zay is his Twitter handle if you want to follow him. And, he brought up a point of, a big area of funding for entrepreneurs is venture capitalists, the rich people looking to invest in good businesses. And that is one of the most systemic racist areas that African Americans encounter is some venture capitalists, they won't even give a meeting to a black entrepreneur and stuff like that. So venture capitalism and ways that African American entrepreneurs can acquire funding, they're kind of stuck almost in a feedback loop to where the only venture capitalists that they can approach for funding are other African Americans. So they're systemic there, but it's all tied to that money, and so where I think crypto, Bitcoin, or some other alternative new economic system can be a way to kind of disrupt that systemic classism that all races, are affected by. And that affects the law enforcement too. Whether you're black or white or Indian or Asian or Hispanic, it doesn't matter. You're more likely to have an interaction with the police that goes south and gets violent if you are of a lower socioeconomic class. If you are in a low income area, if it's more likely. I'm not saying those things don't happen with well-to-do people in well-to-do areas, but they happen increasingly more or exponentially more in low income areas. And the systemic classism I'm talking about keeps those poor areas poor, keeps those poor people poor. Okay, so we need to break that cycle, and I think we will see less systemic racism because of changing the socioeconomic landscape in this country and in the world. You know, one example I think, well, I wish we would see is we have millions of people in the street in this country and in the world. But take this country, for example. We have millions of people in the street protesting, wanting the system to change. All those people also got $1,200 a couple months ago from the government. Well, if all those millions of people would have taken that $1,200 and bought Bitcoin, first off, there's a Twitter bot you can follow that is tracking the daily, you know, your $1,200 stimulus check is worth this much now in Bitcoin, and I think it's up to like $1,900 or even over 2,000. I should have looked before I did the video, but that's an interesting follow. You know, yeah, if everybody would have bought Bitcoin with that and held it, they'd have more money. So extrapolate that out. If everyone there was dollar cost averaging, you know, and the freedom of being your own bank, of having, you know, your money work for you. That's how rich people stay rich. Their money works for them. Poor people stay poor because they live check to check. Their money just, you know, keeps a roof on over their head and food on the table. But it's this mentality of like saving, investing, all those things. And why I think this will be crypto or some alternative economic system is that the game is already so rigged with the stock market and stuff like that, that you can't invest your money in the stock market if you don't have that much money. Well, I mean, you can, but it's not going to change your life to where crypto has so much room to grow that it can change lives. It can change the stats. It already has. In 10 years, think of the new millionaires it's made, right? Think of the people with the financial freedom. Now, maybe some of those people are out in the street marching, for sure. But a lot of them have already seen what the revolution looks like. And the revolution is undercutting the banks. You know, saying to that corrupt venture capital and the corrupt lending industry, you know, I don't need you. We got our own thing, you know. And I think, you know, that's a big threat to the system. We don't realize it because we get caught up in the market manipulation and the dollar value of Bitcoin and all of these things, which is hard to tune out. Man, you know, I pay attention to that more than I should. But the big picture, the macro picture of what it represents and the freedom it can represent to everybody, regardless of race and religion and whatever, cannot be denied. And we've seen it happen over the last 10 years, and it will continue to happen over the next 10 years and the 10 years after that. And it's a revolution that's going on right now, and it's peaceful and quiet, but it's more powerful, I think, and will be more powerful. Maybe it's not powerful now, more powerful than people in the streets protesting with signs. It will end up being more powerful and more peaceful and more quiet than any other protest or revolution we'll see in our lifetime. I truly believe that. You know, if you want to look at history of how much a threat a undercutting of the traditional economic and financial power structures can be to the system. Well, one, it's actually not even history, but you know, I don't know if anyone saw some files were released from the Pentagon that they already have a protocol in place for my kids' generation, Generation Z, to how the U.S. Armed Forces will handle a Bitcoin revolution. Now, I didn't read, you know, the actual file and to see what they thought, but isn't that pretty interesting that the Department of Defense is involved in a potential Bitcoin revolution? But, you know, prior to Bitcoin, a very prominent historical event that's in the news right now that involves racism and classism is the Black Wall Street riots in 1920 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which there's some weird psyops kind of stuff going on to where the Republican convention is being held there, and it was going to be held today on Juneteenth, which is, you know, Emancipation Day for the state of Texas, for slaves. You know, and I don't believe that that location and that date was chosen by our White House administration on accident. I think there's, like I said, some psyops there. But anyway, that event, if you look it up, was an area of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where it was just ripe with black entrepreneurs. And people were moving from all over to move to this area of Tulsa, Oklahoma, to be able to start their own business, start their own banks. There was real estate agency, you know, all these black-owned businesses. And so nationwide it was called Black Wall Street. And what was happening was that area was growing and prospering at a rate that far exceeded the white areas of Tulsa. And eventually the animosity and the threat to the white economy was so much that there was a riot, and I think, like, you know, 300 or so African Americans were killed, and like basically all their businesses were burned down. The whole neighborhood was destroyed. You know, and so I obviously I wasn't alive. Obviously I haven't read too much about it. There was a lot of other factors probably going into that, but a lot of it had to do with they had found a workaround the traditional systems that was keeping them down because of classism and racism, or systemic classism and systemic racism. And it got to a point where it looked unstoppable, so that, you know, that led to violence and stuff like that. But you know, it just shows what I'm getting at with that is that financial freedom and you know, finding a way out of the traditional systems that keep us down is a threat to the system. And whether that's because of racism or classism, you know, every situation is different. But the financial freedom is a threat, and that makes crypto a revolution. You know, I hope no one hears me talk about crypto and thinks I'm just like, everybody's going to be rich, man. We're all going to be living in mansions, driving Lambos. No, I don't think that. You know, I think it's possible if you really learn how to play the crypto game well, and you trade and all of these things. But I'm talking about the macro, you know, ideology of crypto, and the freedom that it can and will provide is going to be so powerful. And I really wish that a lot of the people, you know, protesting and standing up for the rights and stuff, like, realize that too, because we're missing an opportunity to turn that anger and everything into something constructive. And we can build that. This is Bitcoin's moment. Not only is it going to be a hedge against the inflation and depression and crash and, you know, all the bad economic stuff that's going to come on the back end of all these protests and coronavirus pandemic stuff. It's going to be a great hedge against that to preserve wealth, but it's going to be a great opportunity to grow wealth for people that have been disenfranchised from the financial world. And I truly believe that. I hope people get that notion when I talk about crypto, that is my large scale view of it. That it is a protest. It is a revolution. You know, I turned my $1,200 into Bitcoin, and you should have too. And any more money the government gives you, you know, if they're going to print money, which makes our money not sound money, you might as well turn it into something that is sound money. That instead of you know, playing into the inflationary system of fiat money, turning it into a economic system that is deflationary in nature, you know, is very important. You know, I won't go into what inflation and deflation is. But if you listen to the government, they say that deflation is bad. But if you look into this, deflation is good for people. It's bad for the state. So again, just another area that Bitcoin is a huge threat to the standard system. And I hope that didn't ramble too much. I hope it made sense. I hope it was inspiring. And like I said, I'm not discrediting all the protesting going on. I think it's great. I love seeing the streets flooded with people that care passionately about things. But I just know that, you know, this will pass, people will move on and not really change their mind. Some policy will change. But going forward, creating lasting change, we have to do that with our wallets, you know, in our savings and our lifestyles. And that's what Bitcoin and crypto represent to me. So I hope everyone is staying safe, staying sane, and you know, I hope you're staying weird too. So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for helping find the others. Peace out, guys.